Hello everyone, it's your Peacekeeper, and it's time for the next video in our How to Play series on the French battleship line. This is the Tier 8 Richelieu class of battleships. Richelieu was a class of 4 planned and 2 built battleships. Built for the French Navy between 1935 and 1955, the 2 completed ships were Richelieu and Jean Bart. Clemenceau and Gascon were the other 2 ships that were not completed. Clemenceau actually had her keel laid down, but the hulk was sunk by air attack in 1944. The Richelieu class was designed to be an upscaled version of the preceding Dunkirk class, with the intent to combat the Italian Littorio class battleships. The gun layout remained the same, however, caliber went up from 13.4 inches to 15 inches, or 330 millimeters to 380 millimeters for those operating in the metric system. This class would be the first French battleships designed and built to comply with the terms of the Washington Naval Treaty. With a standard displacement of 35,000 tons, 8 15-inch guns and 2 quad turrets placed forward, the ships would represent an enlarged, up-armored, and up-gunned Dunkirk-class battleships, and many of the attributes of the Richelieu class were actually tied to that of the Dunkirk class, so that they could maintain operational standards when operating together. Like Dunkirk and other French quad turret designs, there was an internal bulkhead that separated the firing pairs from each other to prevent one shell from taking out the entire mount. This was proven, after the ships were launched, to be of benefit, as at Mers el-Kabir, Dunkirk had a turret that was hit which killed half of the gun crew while the other half was still operational. Also, like the Dunkirk class, the 4 barrels were not individually mounted so that they could elevate independent of one another. This would have added way too much weight to the turret, and so instead they are mounted in pairs for elevation purposes. Propulsion would be provided by new Parsons steam turbines, and 6 Indre-style boilers, which featured a higher steam pressure than Dunkirk. This moved Richelieu along at nearly 32 knots when overboosting the steam engines to 179,000 shaft horsepower from their rated 155,000 shaft horsepower. Clemenceau differed from Richelieu and Jean Bart in that her secondary arrangement was going to be 4 triple 152mm turrets instead of 3. This placed 2 of them on either side of the superstructure and 2 in a super-firing pair to the rear. This required a reduction in belt armor as well as the turret armor for the 152mm guns so that the tonnage could be used to install the 4th turret, as well as armor the exposed barbette of the rear super-firing turret so that you could have some semblance of protection for the magazine spaces. Gascon was probably the most rapid departure from this entire class. It took one of the turrets from the front and moved it to the rear. This can be seen in Gascon in-game. And the other major change was that while they kept the 352mm or the triple 152mm turrets, they were now placed centerline with the super-firing pair to the front. In terms of service history, only Richelieu and Jean Bart were actually completed or saw any service. And Jean Bart's history, while fascinating, we're going to cover that when the ship actually makes it into the game, which from the sounds of it isn't too far off. And so we're going to focus entirely on Richelieu, because she's the only one that actually saw service. Richelieu was launched in January of 1939, armed in 1940, and then bound for Dakar, French West Africa, when the acceptance of the French-German armistice was being signed. The captain of Richelieu, not believing that this armistice would actually occur, ordered the ship to Casablanca just 2 days later, but would be ordered to proceed to Dakar by the French Admiralty. Due to fears about French naval assets falling into Germans' hands, the British would begin their attempts to prevent the French naval assets from being captured. And this was done by either interring ships that they could capture, sinking them, or blockading them into the ports that they were at. 5 days after the British attacked the French Navy at Mers el-Kabir, swordfish from the HMS Hermes torpedoed Richelieu at Dakar and caused the ship to list badly enough to settle on the bottom of the harbor. Richelieu would then be utilized to attack the British battleships Barham and Resolution as they were out at sea when they attacked Dakar in person. Richelieu was stationary at the time. Her main battery did fire 24 rounds during the defense of Dakar, but no hits are recorded. In fact, damage caused by Richelieu's gunners were actually done from shore batteries, as they had sent several of the crew to the shore batteries to man them instead of the battleship itself, since it was basically a stationary target. After French forces in Africa pledged allegiance to the Allies, Richelieu sailed at slow speed to New York for refit and repair. Barrels salvaged from the Jeanne Bart were used to rearm Richelieu's damaged turret, which was damaged during the defense of Dakar. She had a significant amount of anti-aircraft guns added in the form of 20mm Oerlikons and 40mm Bofors. She'd be utilized as part of the British Home Fleet for 5 months between 1943 and 1944, at the end of 1943 and the beginning of 1945. She then sailed the Pacific Ocean. After being relieved by the HMS Howe, she returned to Europe for a brief refit and repair, and then would sail back to the Pacific for the remainder of World War II. In terms of the in-game play style of this class of battleships, you can expect this class to perform exactly the same way Richelieu does. The same way that Dunkirk does. The bow camping nature of the ship is enhanced by the fact that she can reliably bounce 16-inch shells, which is of great importance since at Tier 8 she will see 16-inch guns from Tier 7. Well, technically now Tier 6 if you count Mutsu, but Tier 7 all the way up to Tier 10. And so she does spend a lot of time bow camping. However, one of the downsides to constantly bow camping is at close ranges with the way that the turrets are designed. You can see here, the faces are pretty vertical on these turrets, and thus, even though they're quite thick at 430 millimeters of armor, it is possible for Richelieu to actually lose her main battery in its entirety if the enemy battleship is actually aiming for them. This happened to me on a live stream shortly after the French battleships were added to the game. It is excessively frustrating and really not that uncommon. So the ship's best attributes are definitely going to be in her relative stealthy nature, 12.6 kilometers. Not the stealthiest at Tier 8, but far from the worst. She has very good AA for a battleship. She has decent secondaries, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. She has decent secondaries, but really her biggest strength is using the speed boost consumable to flank enemy positions. That speed and the relative stealthy nature just allows her to just push into areas where she wouldn't normally, like battleships wouldn't normally be able to get to. And I find the ship to be quite a lot of fun to play. In fact, she's very consistent for about 70 to 80,000 damage and a sunken ship or two, depending on how many battleships are in the game versus how many destroyers. I had very few games in Richelieu that were less than that, and quite a few that were well above that. Speaking of the secondaries, this is a Tier 8 battleship, and we do have access to some mods upgrades that allow us to put on the secondary battery firing range. I'm going to strongly caution you against that. While the main battery or the secondary battery range can be boosted to 10.6 kilometers, the problem with the secondaries on Richelieu is that they are concentrated almost entirely in the back end of the ship. In fact, you can see here are the three triple 152mm gun mounts. Those are the only thing that can really fire rearward effectively. You can see here the remainder of the secondaries are these 300mm guns on each side, so 6 total turrets, 6 total turrets, 6 barrels per side. Really, while the secondaries have long range, they're not particularly useful in a full-on secondary build, and that's why I don't recommend running a secondary build on Richelieu. I just don't find that it's really all that appropriate, because when the ship is sitting bow on, the only secondaries that can really come into play are 2 of these 100mm mounts, which is really not very effective. You really have to expose a lot of the side of the ship to actually using the secondaries. And the secondary build would really only be useful, in my opinion, for destroyers that pop up or cruisers that pop up when, you're busy dealing with battleships ahead of you and they pop up on your sides. And it's really not all that useful for what I consider secondaries to be useful for in this game, which is starting the battleship you're attacking on fire, or dissuading destroyers who are hopefully in front of you from pushing your position and torpedoing you with a rush. And so Richelieu doesn't really benefit in the same way that maybe Alsace or République do from having a full-on secondary build, which is why I don't personally recommend it. Alright, let's talk about some stats. In terms of hit points, Richelieu has 63,700 hit points, torpedo damage reduction of 37%, which is quite good. The main battery consists of 2 quad 15-inch guns. They are both mounted forward in a super firing pair. She does have 6 dual 100mm guns, which also serve as part of her anti-aircraft suite, as well as 3 triple 152mm guns, which surprisingly also join her anti-aircraft suite, which this is a ahistorical fact. They never were able to do that in real life. They simply didn't have the training speed to do that in real life. Main battery firing range is 25.3 kilometers. However, I'm going to highly recommend that you don't attempt to shoot too much at those ranges. The main battery accuracy can be quite trolly. Speaking of trolly, here are the stats for the HE shells. 5,400 damage, 36% fire chance, AP max damage, 11,900 damage. Same 830 meter per second muzzle velocity though. 30-second reload, 31.6 second 180 degree turn time, and 292 meters of dispersion, which for a US battleship captain is going to feel very, very comfortable. However, the sigma value is not nearly as high. So the ship's accuracy is a bit trolly. One thing to remember is that these 15-inch guns are high velocity. I found myself shooting primarily, and we'll see this in battle, primarily at the 7.5 to 10 marker on the static number 9 crosshair from the in-game crosshairs, and that is not a whole lot of lead. Even at ships that were at longer ranges, that's really not much lead time for these, especially considering on the US battleships I'm leading at the 10 to 15 range quite frequently. Anti-aircraft defense. Thanks to the United States, 48 20mm Oerlikons. Actually, are these technically Oerlikons? Yeah, they are. They just look a little bit different. 14 quad 40mm Bofors. Those 100mm guns, you got 6 dual 100mm guns and 3 triple 152mm guns. Your AA circle starts out at 6 kilometers, drops down to 4.2 and then to 2.4. That's going to be with advanced firing training on the captain. At least I believe it. Yes. Okay. Maneuverability, 32 knot top speed. However, we do have an 8% speed boost here, which definitely helps out. Turning circle radius, 850 meters, and a rudder shift time of 12.3 seconds. The ship does turn around quite well in spite of the fact that it has a very large turning circle radius. The rudder shift feels very good for being 12.3 seconds, and the ship is very responsive to helm inputs. Concealment, 12.6 kilometers by sea, 10.7 by air. In terms of upgrades, the first upgrade I'm going to recommend is Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1, which is going to increase your secondary and AA mount survivability by 100%. This is primarily to keep your AA alive, however, it does help with the secondaries for those who are crazy and actually want to do secondary builds. Anyway, the only other one at this tier that I would highly recommend considering is Main Armaments Mod 1. This is going to reduce the risk of your main battery being incapacitated by 20%. It's going to increase the hit point pool of your main battery by 50% and decrease the repair time by 20%. If you are the type of person who likes to play up close and personal, I highly recommend you pick up Main Armaments Mod 1 to avoid the destruction of your main battery, which will happen an annoyingly high amount of the time. In the second slot, Damage Control Systems Mod 1 for the 5% reduction in the chance of catching fire, as well as the 3% reduction of the risk of flooding. If you've got an Engine Boost Mod 1 for the ultimate in trolling, as the ship speed boost affects the ship in acceleration and deceleration, and thus you can do some pretty crazy things to troll enemy destroyers with it by changing your speed very aggressively. The other two things, you don't lose your engines or rudders very often in a battleship, and if you do, generally speaking, your damage control party is up, or you can tank the hits until they become up, so these aren't nearly as big of an issue. In the third slot, I'm running Aiming Systems Mod 1 for the 7% reduction in the dispersion of the main battery. It does also boost your secondary battery firing range by 5% and decrease the dispersion of your secondary battery by 5%. We've already talked about the secondaries are kind of more of an afterthought, but I suppose if you really wanted to run a full-on secondary build, there's Secondary Battery Mod 2 for you for the 20% increase in their firing range and the 20% reduction in the dispersion of your main battery. Personally, because of the configuration on Richelieu, I do not recommend a secondary build. You could also run AA Guns Mod 2 to boost your AA gun firing range by an additional 20%. This is going to push out your AA gun bubble to 7.2 kilometers and makes this thing a virtual no-fly zone, very similar to the U.S. battleships in that regard. Of course, thanks to the U.S. rearming of the ship in New York. Other options at this tier, Main Battery Mod 2, really don't recommend it as the traverse speed is plenty quick. In the fourth slot, you can see I'm running Steering Gears Mod 2 for the 20% reduction in the rudder shift time. I could see a extremely good case made for Propulsion Mod 2, which is going to reduce the time it takes to reach full power by 50%. This is all in that 6-knot window, 0 to 6-knot window. I could see a good case made for that, but personally, the Speed Boost Consumable does a pretty good job of this, so I take Steering Gears Mod 2. I could also see Damage Control Systems Mod 2 being very good as well. 15% reduction in the time it takes to recover from flooding, as well as extinguish a fire. This would be extremely useful if all you do is bow camp and you sit stationary at the mid-range, which I also don't necessarily recommend. In the last slot, I am running Concealment Systems Mod 1 for the 10% reduction in your detection range, as well as a 5% increase in the dispersion of shells fired at you. As far as target acquisition systems Mod 1, the spotting range increase isn't really all that useful. The acquisition range of torpedoes could be useful, however, I think Vigilance would be a better skill to take if you're looking for this. That preserves your 12.6 kilometer detection range, which in my opinion is extremely important. The only other thing to talk about is the Speed Boost Consumable. 8% speed boost, same as the French cruisers. Here's Henri with her... Oh, I lied. Henri is 20%. 8% I think is normal, maybe? I don't know. Anywho's, 8% speed boost. You can do a lot of really fun things with that speed boost. We're going to look at that in the battle video, so let's cut right on over. Alright, so Richelieu is, as we talked about, Richelieu is a very strong ship when it comes to flanking maneuvers. And so good map choice or good map awareness, knowing where to move on a map to actually, expose enemy broadsides is going to be real key to doing the most amount of damage. And this map is Neighbors, and we are top tier, so there's a couple of caveats to that. One being top tier, it's very easy for us to show, oh man, look at how awesome of a game he had. Well, the reason why I've chosen this game over some of the other games I had is because it kind of showed the strengths of this ship when it comes to dealing with destroyers. And, to an extent, dealing with enemy battleships as well. We're going to see a Mutsu get punished. We're going to see some enemy destroyers get punished as well. So, let's go and you guys know my tactics by now when it comes to this map. I almost universally go towards the north and hover around the northern point. If not, the furthest south that I get is about the island in the E6 square. Really not too keen on open waters. Not that Richelieu can't handle open waters, it's just that this ship and most ships are better off when you have the opportunity to get away from enemy fire. So that's the reason why you see me a lot of times hiding near islands or in islands. And yes, that chat. Dankeschön is not whatever it was he typed. Anywho, not to draw too much attention to that. Doesn't matter. So, you know, I could have chosen about 2 other battles that I had done that showed the ship in a much more ridiculous light, showing the ship's ability to flank to the extreme. And really what I wanted to kind of emphasize with this is, you know, its capabilities when it comes to pushing a flank, maybe the more obvious battleship role. In terms of, you know, outright tactics, it's pretty simple. The ship's strength is going to be in the mid-range when it comes to dealing with battleships. And by mid-ranges, I'm talking 12.5k to at most 14k, 15k. Any closer than that, and shells coming from enemy battleships will hit the flat or nearly vertical faces of the turrets, and that you have a high probability of losing them. And any further away, and you just run into dispersion problems. Now, the primary issue with dispersion on Richelieu and Dunkirk isn't necessarily that the guns themselves are inaccurate, it's that they have such high muzzle velocity that people tend to miss. Like, for instance, this one. Fantastic salvo. We lead off with a double citadel and a overpen. Actual dispersion was actually quite garbage. Had I been able to get the correct lead, we probably would have dev struck that poor ship off the face of the map. Would have been a very early trip home for that cruiser. Which, you know, as far as I'm concerned, isn't that big of a deal. Poor Boise. Never really even stood a chance. Okay, so we're gonna round this island. Ooh, our Hatsuharu needs to get out of there. Boise, we're not gonna shoot and waste our salvo at the Boise. The Farragut, sorry, not Hatsuharu. Farragut did a very, very good job of getting those torpedoes off there. Oh, Fubuki. Fubuki? What? Fubuki dropped torps and then ran all the way to the south in that time? Alright, well, okay, whatever. Okay, so at this point, we're in the broadside hunting mode. And their entire team is elected to go to the south. Please don't do this. I'm just telling you, it's really not a good idea. And you can see we overled this New Mexico, whom I'm assuming at the time was kind of stationary more than it was anything. We're broadside to Massachusetts, or as near broadside as we possibly could get. He is shooting at us. Dispersion. And that bow armor. Well, stern armor. That whole plating. We'll just go with that. We got 2 fires burning on us because we're in secondary range of the Massachusetts. We are just not going to deal with an exceptionally large amount of, you know, fire damage. We're going to let these 2 fires go for a little bit, and then we're going to repair them. And, you know, the Massachusetts is within secondary range, but we've got a pretty decent push here. This Massachusetts is turning. And so we're going to hang out here. We pop our speed boost so that we can go, you know, start moving in reverse a lot quicker. But this Massachusetts is exposing that broadside, yo. So we're going to engage the Massachusetts. This is a little bit close for my comfort, but 2 normal pens, 6,300 damage. Here we are 5 minutes into the match, and we're at 43,000 damage and climbing thanks to a fire. So, now that the Massachusetts has decided to turn tail and run, we're going to start, and we are going to start moving forward again. We're going to try and stay up here with our Monarch, who has graciously decided that going to take over the lead from me here, pushing this flank. We're going to back up just a little bit more, though, because I don't know where all these destroyers are at. Their Monarch. Evasion. Nice. Ooh, Mutsu. Charles Martel. Okay. We are just close enough. Oh, should fall off detection here as soon as the gun bloom goes down. Oh, maybe not. Alright, well, Mutsu, broadside. There's the enemy Fubuki. We're going to shoot at the Mutsu since Fubuki disappeared on us. And broadside Mutsu is... it's a paddling, it really is. 9k, okay, so not a huge amount of damage right off the bat. Enemy Fubuki launched torpedoes, nothing really good there for her on that. We're going to try and push as hard as we can here. Now, I'm really not happy with this positioning. There's Kagero. Not happy with my own positioning here because I'm caught. There's battleships that we've got our broadside to. Okay, aiming a little low, trying to get some shells to land at the waterline or below it. There's a single citadel and some normal pens and overpens for 22k. Up to 75,983 damage. Kind of a mistake made here. Not really. We beached ourselves in what I would consider to be pretty good positioning. However, we've left our Monarch pretty exposed. Charles Martel burning. Oh, nope. Akizuki just killing. Outright. Monarch has finally taken the most punishment here. Okay, Mutsu coming out. Again, backwards. Shot out. We've been playing this pretty close. And Citadel for the sink, 10k. Unfortunately, not enough to save our Monarch. Okay, so we got a bunch of destroyers over here. We've got Fubuki and Kagero, Hatsuharu to the south, Farragut also to the south, but the last two are out of torpedo range. Oop, got briefly spotted there. Spotted now quite a bit more. Alright, well, since he's hiding, we're gonna turn and we're gonna utilize some islands here, and we're gonna try and go after some of the ships more towards the south. Again, trying to work angles here. Yes, yes, some shells impacted that rear deck area. Oop, see, it was a good thing we turned. Hatsuharu torps. Meanwhile, waiting for the main battery to finish turning. Gonna have to expose a little bit of a side here to make it past us. We're gonna end up taking some damage, but come on, front turrets, let's go. And of course, there's somebody screaming, well, if you had a secondary build, you'd be, you would currently be dealing, you know, secondary damage. Okay, yeah, fine. Oh, hot Fubuki getting smacked pretty hard there. Secondary is doing some work. I think that was on the North Carolina there. We do have a Cyclone coming in, which is going to be of tremendous help here. And... oop, Fubuki. Okay, nice. Just over 10 lead. Fubuki disappears. Good dispersion. Down goes Fubuki. 3 overpens. I suspect we would have probably had a significantly higher number than that had the Fubuki had more hit points. But it is what it is. So now we've got some choices to make. We're really kind of in a non-ideal position here with this North Carolina Monarch and the Massachusetts. Not really in a good position to engage them out in the open. Oop. Derp the turret, but to prevent it from dying, needed to burn that repair. Monarch shells came in, did about 4k in damage. Kind of rolling around here. We're up to 93,472 damage. What more can we do? Hatsuharu detected there. Secondary's going to town. It's only got 646 hit points. Trying to get the front guns to bear. Maybe the secondaries will actually behave. Oh, nope, we're going to shoot. And we got him with the main battery with 1 overpen there, but we needed him dead. That's a second destroyer that we killed. That was all but 1 more left to go, and that's the Kagero, which is currently up north torping. There's also a Massachusetts somewhere around here. There's also North Carolina somewhere around here. We're at 94,000 hit damage. We've got a pretty distinct lead here, but I think a large part of that has to do with the fact that we had some critical ships get taken out at the very beginning. Okay, this North Carolina is nearly full hit points. You can afford to lose a couple. Some of us are, you know, just a little over half here. Oh. And awkward moments when New Mexico and Richelieu decide to occupy the same point in space at the same time. We're going to go ahead and we're going to tee him up. Sorry, man. Hugs. And we're going to back up again and see if maybe we can't get some shots off. The Cyclone actually is provided for a little bit of derpiness. Able to basically beach ourselves, but with the speed boost, you can see how quickly we were able to reverse out of that situation. Well, that's second time now we've been able to reverse out of a situation thanks to Speed Boost being a very valuable consumable on a battleship, especially in a battleship like this where, you know, speeding up and slowing down is a very important attribute. We didn't spend a whole lot of time really bow camping this match. We did spend, I mean, I guess technically every time I fired my main battery is bow camping. Whatever. But, you know, of importance to note here is to note that we were able to play the ship at relatively close range thanks to the island in the middle of what would be the sea cap, I believe it is, on this map. And that really did provide some benefit to us. So here you can see we're kind of blind firing into the unknown here, trying to catch this Massachusetts before it kills our New Mexico. Can't really see either of them, so I have no idea how well it is or isn't going. Can only imagine that Massachusetts is beating that poor New Mexico up. So any rounds that we can land might help our New Mexico just a little bit. Okay, we're using the mini-map here to get these, and just goes to show the mini-map isn't exactly the most accurate thing in the world. Shells land, again, 0 damage. We're getting there, we're coming. Hang in there, buddy. There is a Monarch floating around. Ooh, New Mexico killed him with secondaries. New Mexico secondaries are OP, please nerf. That's pretty impressive when you think about it. Okay, Monarch finally showing up to the match. Once again, we had traveled just far enough to not have any real idea where he was at. But this time not to be able to see him, but this time we actually had a shell splash there to work with, so we were able to get a normal pen that did no damage. Thanks, Wargaming. And now we're finally detected. Monarch is in there. We are capping for some reason. And Shore's going in for the torpedo salvo. We're going to get one more salvo off. Shores gets the torpedoes. Our shells impact. One normal pen. And we're going to end the match with a little over 95,000 damage, if I remember correctly. Yes, our team won. Go Team Eagle. Dasha is on our side. 95,308 damage, 3 kills, 4 citadels, second on the team with 1414 base XP. There's the detailed report and credits and XP screen. Anyway, I hope this video has helped you guys out. Again, we were able to play off the close range stuff thanks to an island breaking line of sight and really being the best armor in the game. I don't usually recommend that, so this was kind of playing it a little out of sorts. But anyway, Richelieu is a fun ship to play. Hope this helped you guys. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and thank you for watching.